What's happening here is so intense that almost no one gets it. MicroStrategy is rebranding and is now called Strategy. But that's not all, because now banks are allowed to hold Bitcoin. And Michael Saylor said that if this happens, which is exactly what's going on right now, then Bitcoin will rise to $5 million. Because Operation Jogpoint 2.0 is now officially over. And banks are now officially allowed to hold Bitcoin in the U.S. And this whole thing is even backed by the FDIC here. This is so massive. On one hand, of course, we have the MicroStrategy story, which is now going through a rebrand. This whole thing is going viral and so on. We're going to check that out in a second. But what's even crazier, that Elizabeth Warren and all the goons who have been shooting down Bitcoin, now they finally have to shut their mouth. A lot of things are coming to light here. How there were systematic attempts to debank people, to exclude them from the banks. Documents are even being destroyed here. Documents that are supposed to prove that not just individuals, not just companies, but even entire banks were systematically driven into the ground. That had anything to do with Bitcoin or crypto. Yeah, you heard that right. They let banks collapse here just because they had something to do with Bitcoin. But guys, one thing at a time. Let's start off nice and chill from the beginning. MicroStrategy is no longer called MicroStrategy. It's suddenly just called Strategy. We're seeing a rebrand here. There's a new logo, there's a new company website. Today is also the earnings call for MicroStrategy, and we're going to take a quick look at that in a bit. Michael Saylor has already announced it. He said, hey, today is a big strategy day. And many thought, okay, is the strategic Bitcoin reserve or something like that? Of course, that wasn't it. I already hinted at that it won't be coming. But MicroStrategy is changing its name here. You can see it here too. The branding on the building has actually already changed. It's now Strategy. Michael Saylor writes, new brand, same strategy, so MicroStrategy naturally wants to continue here. They want to continue to accumulate Bitcoin here, and here you leverage the whole thing, and thus on the one hand you pump up the Bitcoin price on the one hand, on the other hand you pump up your own shares and have a business model here. It's not something that can be compared to other companies. They've created their own niche and are absolute frontrunners in their own category. British Hortus says here that MicroStrategy has been renamed to Strategy. Very, very good move. Nothing is micro about strategy. So there's nothing small. Here at Strategy, it's just strategy. It's obviously, or rather, MicroStrategy is something very, very big. And why should we still keep MicroStrategy in the name? That's why people are saying it's a killer name move here, because strategy just sounds way more powerful than this. Although, of course, you have to get used to the fact that it now has a different name. There will also be an earnings call. But at the time of recording this video, the earnings call hasn't happened yet. And I might make an extra video about it. Or maybe I'll throw it in at the end. Depending on that, let's see what comes out of this. But that's definitely one story. MicroStrategy's success story is going to keep going strong. A lot of people have also written in the comments down below, yes, MicroStrategy will be the most valuable company in the world by 2030. Others say 2040, some say 2035. And then, of course, there are all the people on the other side. They say MicroStrategy is just a Ponzi scheme. I don't think we need to get into that right now. Why MicroStrategy is not a Ponzi scheme. I've mentioned that in other videos before. Although it's really just a small thing. Whether it's called MicroStrategy or strategy, it's not a big deal. The key thing is that the strategy keeps moving forward, and that definitely confirms it. Saylor, he's going to keep accumulating Bitcoin. He's going to keep leveraging the whole thing and shoot Bitcoin to the moon. What's way crazier now, and this is the real headline, is that it's kind of flying under the radar. People aren't really catching on to what's going on. That in the end, the FDIC is now giving the green light for Bitcoin. And Operation Jogpoint 2.0 is official. Finished. It says here in the official letter, the FDIC, which is like the deposit insurance here in the U.S., has announced today that they are reevaluating their supervisory approach to crypto-related activities. That's ultra crazy. Check this out. This includes replacing the financial institution letter and providing a pathway for institutions to get involved in crypto and blockchain-related activities while adhering to the principles of safety and soundness. To adhere to, this information would be highlighted in a statement from the acting chairman, Travis Hills. And it points to a change in the way the FDIC supervises banks that are involved in crypto activities, and that's just so intense. Guys, banks are part of the classic fiat system. I know you can hate on banks and all that. Screw the bank and whatever, let's kick off the Bitcoin trend, money and all that. But banks are a crucial player that Bitcoin can't get around. And you can just say now, from Kibia, let all the banks stay out of the adoption. But as it stands right now, it's going to be exactly the opposite. That's why banks are going to play a really, really relevant role in Bitcoin adoption. And that now loans can also be based on Bitcoin. That means Bitcoin can be used as collateral here. So as collateral to issue new fiat loans. It goes on to say what that means. This means that banks can hold their customers' crypto assets, and they are insured by the FDIC. The choke point blah 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 letter which the two governments hear to the banks. Any involvement in crypto activities is prohibited, was withdrawn and replaced. And that's the crazy part, the choke point is officially over. And that was basically the condition from Michael Saylor, as he says, that Bitcoin will rise to 5 million. We need ETFs, we need corporate value accounting, and ultimately we need clear regulation here. That in the end, banks can also hold Bitcoin. Right now, it was always the case that banks could do that. But it was regulatory, so I'd say it was complicated with the SAB 121 rule, and so on, which has now been circumvented. That it just wasn't worth it to hold Bitcoin here. And in the end, this is the final starting signal for banks to roll out their loan offerings. But not just the loan offerings, they can also do other things with Bitcoin here. Because that was basically the topic. With Operation Jock 2.0 that, for example, certain people would debank. That means they did something with crypto or Bitcoin, for example. They opened a bank account here and did something with Bitcoin in the company. Or they had a bank, for example, and now they wanted to offer Bitcoin. And then they would just, let's say, exclude it from the banks. Then their accounts would just get canceled. And it all happened without warning. And that won't be the case anymore. And a lot of people also assume that Scott Bassett was definitely involved here. Also, that other regulators who were nominated by the Trump administration were clearly involved here. To solve this problem here, and that's basically the craziest part, that the regulation just has to fit. If the regulation doesn't fit, then the Bitcoin price won't go up. Because then companies, which are being cautious here, companies then don't want to allocate any money into Bitcoin. Because companies are scared that they might have some regulatory hurdles here to be afraid of. British HODL writes here that the FDIC just announced it will be revising its crypto guidelines to help banks participate in the growth of Bitcoin. In the regulatory and oversight area, things are developing very quickly. That's where it starts, then it affects the price. Buckle up, folks. And that's basically the right warning that you guys are putting out here. You really need to buckle up now, because those are things that are happening behind the scenes. I've mentioned this a couple of times in the last videos, that things are happening behind the scenes that a lot of people just don't understand. Partially, I don't know, that's always the big question. Is now all priced in? Nothing, everything priced. Whatever. Can you just leave me alone? It's a crooked way of philosophizing about whether everything is priced in or not. On the other hand, there are people like this, Adam Beck, who says, no, people just don't get it. It's all not priced in. Then there are people on the other side again, who say, yeah, everything is already priced in. Here are all the crazy things that are happening. Everything is already priced in. But definitely so many intense things like what we're seeing here. Then the Bitcoin price would have to be much, much higher. There are always people who write in the comments below, Marty, such intense news like what you're dropping here. The Bitcoin price should already be at 5 million. Yeah. For all I care, it could stay that way. But the reality is that maybe a lot of people just aren't aware of it. What's going on in the background here? They might not even understand what that means, because that's a regulation and it's not that easy to understand. What's happening here? We also need to take a look at that, how Bitcoin is systematically suppressed here, just like how people are systematically being debanked, and so on. Because in the end, that's also a scandal. That's the next thing, that there's also educational work happening here now. Not only is the right regulation for Bitcoin here now, but the necessary educational work is also taking place. That's necessary here to debank all these gangsters. And now just take this in. Now there's a statement from Elizabeth Warren, who was really, really heavily involved in the anti-Bitcoin stories, in the debanking stories that ultimately kicked people out of the banks massively against Bitcoin. She kept hitting it again and again. And now she acts like she's the angel here. Now, when the Biden administration is over, now, when this thing blows up in people's faces, now, when the truth comes to light, now, when the truth is being laid out, now Elizabeth Warren is crawling out of her cave, even though I actually live in the cave. She's talking about freedom. Check this out.
Thank you, Mr. President. So debanking is a real problem, and we need to work on it urgently. To solve it, I have a strength in stories from consumers and organizations that were debanked. I would ask you for that.
A stack of numerous stories from various consumers and different organizations, both individual and corporate entities that have been unjustly debanked. Faint. I want to offer them for the record. Thank you, ma'am. Of course, everything is blacked out now and stuff. They just told people, okay, hey, now close your bank account, shut down your companies, and so on.
So anyone who had anything to do with Bitcoin here would simply be excluded from the banking system. I'm here at the beach now. Check this out, let's fucking go.
We just don't want that anymore. It also says here, further evidence the FDIC has the original joke point memorandum that was sent to all banks and agencies in 2022, removed from the internet. And that's the next scandal, which a lot of people don't understand. That means here, the FDIC didn't just throw Bitcoin under the bus. The banks here are massively censoring. Some say here the US has been set back 2 or 3 years. Because in the end, we could be so much further along in technology, in adoption and all that. And it's not just that they've been attacking Bitcoin, but they're also trying to black out the documents here. Didn't Senator Loomis put a veto on that or what? A veto, but she definitely spoke out powerfully. She said, hey folks, we need to expose the wrongdoings here. Can't be that the FDIC is just going all out against Bitcoin like this. And additionally, people, the banks, and in addition, if it now comes to light, suddenly want to destroy all the documents here. Because this whole thing is documented, and a lot more is probably going to come out about what's happening here in the near future. It's now being said that the FDIC has released 175 documents regarding bank oversight of crypto activities, a step towards more transparency before a court deadline. As already explained here, banks are facing resistance. Long wait times, investigations, stops, blah, blah, blah. In the end, people were just, let's say, canceled here. Many banks abandoned their crypto plans because in the end, the regulatory clarity just wasn't there. And now, in the end, we're seeing a complete 180-degree turn. There are even some really crazy things happening here. Like, for example, we had Silvergate Bank and Silicon Valley Bank, and those two banks actually went bankrupt. And there are now a lot of people like Marty here, for example, who ultimately keep proving things in X. And Twitter and things like that here, or rather just in X Twitter, there are no more, they are basically the whole. Always bringing evidence to light. It's been a really long time, like 1 or 2 years. There's also Caitlin Long, who has always been doing this. And that was basically it. Banks that are involved with Bitcoin and crypto, and there are basically rumors about that. Or I don't know if that's been proven by now. Some say they have evidence for that. Some say that hasn't been definitively proven yet. Caitlin Long has actually been doing this for about 2 years. They're basically saying that the banks are being intentionally allowed to implode by both governments to calculate the chaos in the market. Marty even goes so far as to say that FTX wasn't really that bad, but that the FDIC somehow had something against Bitcoin, against crypto. And this thing is intentional, basically letting it blow up. But I have to backtrack a bit on that, because FTX was already a shady operation in Sam Bank. SBF, Sam Bank fraud, Sam Bank, right? As there's definitely some criminal activity going on here, although I don't know all the details. That's just my personal assessment here and so on. But they also issued paper Bitcoin, of course. There were no Bitcoins backing that and so on. But Marty definitely says that they were also on the list of closures from both governments. Here from Operation Shockpoint 2.0. But that's up for debate. The Silvergate Bank and the Silicon Valley Bank, it's pretty likely that they were on the closure list. And then there was a cascading effect. First, one bank went bankrupt. Then the next bank got pulled down with it. Then it dragged the Bitcoin market down too. And that was apparently a targeted attack from Operation Jogpoint 2.0. And if that was really the case and the papers here were destroyed, they have now been lifted again. That some of them were partially destroyed. A lot more is probably going to come to light. So it could really be that maybe 1 or 2 people will have to take responsibility for this. I'm really curious about that. If people really have to take responsibility for this. Hey folks, what's going on here is super explosive. If you want to have censorship-resistant money, I'll put a link down below for you. 21 Bitcoin, how you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. It's never been more important to have Bitcoin than it is right now. So definitely check it out. With the code Bitcoin, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. And then there's the ultra recommendation. In just 2 days, the live call for Bitcoin Advantage is happening. I'll put a link down below where you can join the waiting list. 1,000 people here, intense and crazy with daily insights. It's really crazy in the group. Here you get added value every day for free. And you can be part of the live call where the Bitcoin Advantage will be introduced for the first time. Guys, that's it. Let me know what you think about the events. Peace out.